say hello to, very happy to say hello to, no problem. We want to welcome Allison J Baber, and who joins us from Florida today. Allison, as you watched, played Figaroa, the cat. We were talking before the call started about Michael turning Figaro into Figaroa. So that was Michael taking his artistic liberties, and it was a very good idea, I would say. And then we have Sandra Woodall. Thank you for coming back, Sandra, and talking about your fabulous, fabulous designs for this ballet. And then I'm happy to have my colleagues, Amy London, our ballet master, Joellen Arntz, company manager and head of wardrobe for Smuin, and KT Graham, our production director and stage manager. So all of us were there when Pinocchio was getting up on its legs, so to speak, and becoming such a beautiful reality. I would love to start with you, Sandra, because you've designed so many ballets and operas, and I know how busy you've been in China in recent years, and just incredible the work you've done all over the world, literally. So you're such a treasured gem right here in San Francisco. We're so blessed to get to work with you and to know you so well. But how is it for you when you create a ballet, costumes for a ballet that may be an abstract? There's usually one costume style for the men and one for the women. And this is certainly the polar opposite of that. You have such distinct costumes and so many textures, so many different fabrics. I mean, where do you begin with a process like that? Obviously, Michael had narrowed down his libretto, and you must have had that story and had an understanding of the characters. But how does your imagination run wild with that? And where do you begin in designing something like this huge production?
Well, as you mentioned, Michael is really amazing about fitting the person to the character and the character to the person. And it always seems to me that right at the beginning, when I find out who is playing which character, it's like already starts, bubbling, because generally I know the person already. And that's one of the best things, because it's like, I didn't want Allison to be wearing a cat costume. I wanted her to be the cat. And that to me is like each one of them, I kind of like have a relationship, or at least in my mind, I have a relationship to each one of the dancers, and there's some quality that they have. And Michael always brings that out in the best way. And I try to do the same thing with when they're characters like this. And I really like to do the characters, and I like to bring that quality together. Joellen and I were remembering the ballet a little bit and thinking about, sometimes it's a character who thinks of themselves as a prince, let's say, and then they have to wear this kind of 3-foot long beard or something. And I remember in this, telling Easton, oh, thank you for wearing that thing and practicing with it, because they bring so much to it. And especially when we make it together, we say, oh, if you need it a little shorter or whatever. But for me, it's really, I love to do character pieces like that.
Well, some of the fabrics and textures that you chose, like the costumes for the pig and the fox, for example, were just incredible. And then Easton had to get used to his fat suit as well, wearing that. But in classic Michael Smuin fashion, we had so many props in this ballet, and as if the dancing isn't hard enough, you also have to master a prop or a scenic element or a design or a part of your costume. I remember when I was flying, and you had to there was a harness created that would fit me perfectly and hold my pelvis so that when I was lifted off the ground, I could move around. But that you even covered that with my costume fabric, and it blended right in, and you couldn't even see it. It was incredible. but Allison, with your tale, we were trying to remember, how was that for you, working that tale? It was so long, and it reminded me of you must be really good working a train on a long dress.
Yeah, I had actually forgotten how long it was until I had watched it again, but yeah, it did become using it throughout, kind of a little play with it. So it was kind of fun to have to try to maneuver and stuff. But yeah, it made it a little extra challenging with the choreography, but made it too.
Did you ever grow up with cats? Or did you observe cats and how they work? Because you were very, like, throughout the ballet, you always had your hands like little paws, and you were just always in character throughout, and just your little mannerisms. I always loved it when you turned away from the workbench and you took the file and you were nailing, yes. Filing your nails, your claws.
Remember those details of I think Michael always had such a clear idea of what he wanted when he came to the studio from the get-go, but it was so nice that he was so confident in what he wanted that he gave you so much freedom too, to kind of make it your own, to play. And he would tell you if you're going a little too far, he'd try to steer you in a direction. And so as I was trying to remember, like, did I come up with that, or did he tell me to do that? I was, but most of it is him, and then just playing within amongst what he gave. But he was so clear on his characters, that was really nice to feel, that clarity from the get-go, and then also that level of expansion that you could continue to play with once you got it to stage, and it could grow more each time.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking about that too with Michael. He was always so descriptive of the character, and whether he was talking about what your mood is or what you might be thinking. And he was that way when he was directing Roberto, who was just this phenomenal talent. Michael used to say he's like a little Mozart, but anything that Roberto was told, okay, here you're scared, or, oh, here you hurt your knee, and you grab your knee, and he's up on the workbench. And but any little thing, he was so animated. And just so incredible. I remember when Roberto first came to Smuin Ballet, one of our dancers was teaching at a studio in the East Bay. And he said, Michael, I've got this student that is just so incredible. You've got to see him. And so Michael said, okay, well, on a Saturday or one day on the weekend when we were working, he said, why don't you arrange for him to come to the studio? And Michael was just so mesmerized that he quickly worked Roberto and his little dancing partner. They had this little tap dance, and he worked them into the Christmas ballet after Cajun Christmas. Remember that, Amy? And they had this, we were doing Cajun Christmas, and he had all the adults stay on stage so that then you could also see the distinct height differences between these children. At that point, he was only 8 years old. And you could see the height differences, and realize how phenomenal it was, watching him, and just such an incredible talent. Roberto is now 33 years old, and he's no longer dancing. He went on to dance in Sacramento Ballet, and he also danced with Ballet Met in Columbus, Ohio. I remember, I guess we probably last saw him, we've kind of lost touch now, but he came back and danced a couple of performances during the 20th anniversary of our 20th anniversary year, 8 years ago. He had finished doing his Nutcrackers at Ballet Met, and he came back home to the Bay Area, and he was able to do a couple of performances. It was kind of a surprise, but we thought it would really be fun for him to come in. And I was just sharing with Allison that he remembered all of the choreography of the things he had danced from years before. And I don't know if we had an injury or something that happened, but he ended up going into, I think we had him doing the Drummer Boy solo, but he went into some of the Christmas pieces like Wassail, the Gloucestershire Wassail, and Christmas in New Orleans. I mean, he just remembered all of his choreography all those years later. And it was just incredible. Just such a huge talent. And also, you all may not know that he was also an incredible artist. and could just draw and paint. So just such a multi-talented young man. So we miss him, and here and there we hear from him, but I haven't been in touch with him for a little while, but we certainly have the fondest memories of him. But Allison, you were so adorable with him as the cat, and helping him along. Did you ever recall in a performance like having to remind him of anything? Because the little bits that I danced with him as the Blue Fairy, I mean, he just remembered all of his choreography. It wasn't like he was ever frozen on stage, like having any kind of stage fright. It was just, everything was just so fun for him.
It was fun, it was natural, and even at that age, he had a professionalism about, he knew what he was doing. There was never any question that he was going to be in the right place at the right time. Yeah, super talent.
Yeah, he was incredible. KT, I would love to talk a little bit about the scenic elements that help so much in the telling of the story. And in Alex Nichols' clever design, he had that screen, and I think it may have been one of the first times that we used projections in that way to sort of set the place for each scene. Do you know anything about how Alex had come up with that, or perhaps he had already been using projections in some of his theater designs? But all of the props, can you kind of talk us through what that process is like from the time we would all sit together in those huge production meetings that Michael would have and talk about the script and the characters and then, what he envisioned. And then that process, like the logistics that as you work with the scenic designer, can you talk us through what that process is like for you as production director?
Well, in that particular case, usually we have a set gets designed, and we look around for shops. We get bids from different shops. We choose a shop and they build it. With Pinocchio, Alex actually built that workbench and the bed that's in the first scene. He built those himself by hand in his garage, and they're beautiful, beautiful pieces. But we did, once those were done, I think Michael really wanted to be able to work with the elastics with Bert and that opening scene. So that got done very quickly. But then Alex finished the design, the whales, the boats, the one that blew up, and the ribs, and we have to go around and visit a lot of different shops and show them the designs and choose a shop to build them. So that's, and then it's a process of their building. I will go to the shop to check on the build, how it's going several times. Sometimes the designer goes. Alex is quite busy. I'm sorry he couldn't be here today. Because I think that he's an extraordinary talent. He had been using projections, and he had the idea for that screen, and he really sold Michael on the idea of the screen with the projections, and it worked beautifully. I'm always amazed at what Alex comes up with. But then we finally, the whole show was built, and we got it into the theater, and then we sometimes, there are some things that we have to work out in the theater once we have, the big pieces. I mean, those whale ribs were 16 feet tall. And so, they were on rolling bases. So it's a bit of logistics for the dancers to have to work out in the theater, because you can't have some of that stuff in the studio before you get there.
Exactly. We were talking about the challenges of not having all of I guess we had all the props, the smaller things, but we didn't have the bed in the studio, but we had the workbench, because I know that Roberto had to get used to jumping off of that. But anytime I've had to be up on a platform and turn, it is just so terrifying. And Roberto would just do it. Like, oh, well, I guess ignorance is bliss. We don't know that this is supposed to be challenging. and he did his en dehors turn, then his en dedans turn. I mean, he was just incredible. But we had the workbench to get used to, and all of the smaller things. But yeah, so many things that you really only have those few days in the theater. So when we loaded into the theater, Michael was always very aware, because every minute in the theater is just so expensive. And it's a challenge because it's the lighting designer gets no time. And that's the lighting designer probably gets the least amount of time to design the lighting, because you need the dark space, you need the stage. I mean, you can have a model and have an effect, but you really can't. A lot of that is in your head, and you imagine what you want the lighting to look like, and what you want to feature, and what you want to hide. But it's such expensive time in the theater, and valuable time. So we only had that time for Roberto to get used to those elastics with his puppet strings. And then also, of course, the flying for the Blue Fairy, which was great fun for me. I remember when we had that special call with Foy. I think, KT, are there other companies now that manage flying in theaters? But for the longest time, Flying by Foy was it. And we called in Foy, and this family, I think they start in the circus or something like that. But we had to call them, and they came out to San Francisco, and a special harness was made for me that would fit. And then there were, it was connected to 4 wires. And I just remember they said, okay, we're just going to lift you a little bit off the ground. And I think they were used to these large opera singers that were just terrified to be off the ground and not on terra firma. But as soon as I got off the ground, I said, I want to flip. And I had such an urge. Michael just hoped I was going to go coming in just straight across the stage from high to low, and or the reverse on the exit. But I had so much fun that he said, well, okay, then let's have you flip around, and he was telling me what would be a good line for my legs while I was doing that. But the challenge was also when I got out of that harness the first time, Joelle, and we can talk about what happens off stage. This is when Allison has that solo. It's really to buy time for the Blue Fairy to get out of her harness. And it was quite a process. It took several of us to undo all of the buckles on that harness. Joe, do you want to tell that story that nobody knew?
Sure. Well, I think the funny story is when you were getting back into it at the very end of the ballet. And my wardrobe assistant at the time was also doing some drag shows. So this was towards the end of the evening, and during intermission and breaks, he was getting ready for his featured performance after our show. And he had this massive wig, blonde wig. So he's leaning over, trying to buckle Celia into the harness. I'm probably buckling something else, and Cel's looking down too. So her crown gets stuck in his wig. And Cel is starting to go, I've got to go, I've got to fly. And I'm stuck. So I just took my hands, I would just rip.
I think it was a red wig. It was a red wig. I remember red hairs in my crown.
I do remember red hairs flying. And so from that point on, I told Eric that sure, he could get ready during our shows for his show, but leave the wig. Leave the wig until the end. Like, do all your makeup, do everything else, but don't put on the wig until we're done.
His alter ego was Portia, and wasn't that? And that was a crazy time. I was not very happy about that. It was a very stressful moment.
I think you were cussing us both out.
But
yeah, well, and it was happening right on the same side of the stage that I'm calling on. And I'm standing there and I'm watching sheer pandemonium happen just, 10 feet away. And Foy is calling me on the headset saying, do we go? Because they had a cue to lift her and then to travel her. And I'm like, no, I don't think this is a good time to pick her up. Not yet.
I had visions of the wig leaving his head and joining you. So like trailing.
like a dead animal or something hanging in the
Yeah.
air. Oh my word. Yes, you never know what's happening off stage. We try to keep the magic happening on the stage for the audience. And this show had a lot of magic. I think Michael just loved magic. He put so much magic into his ballets. He tried to put magic into the Christmas ballet, right, KT? How many times did he pull out magic tricks, Amy? But this was also very clever. Before we start talking about the magic tricks, KT, can you talk a little bit more about the optical illusion and how Alex designed that little mini theater, Stromboli's theater, within the ballet?
Yeah, so Michael wanted he wanted to be able to do some magic tricks that Cel will talk about in a couple of minutes, but he didn't want the audience to be able to see what was happening. And Alex said, we can fool the audience eye if we build a small stage that's ringed with lights. So that little proscenium stage was ringed with lights. The minute you turn those on, it affects your eyes in the audience, and you can't see much past that light. If for example, when Celia and Bert are on the stage, if Sarah Lenny has a light focused directly on them, of course you'll see them. But anybody standing around them, you don't see them at all because your eye can't perceive them in the darkness. And when Cel and Bert were on that stage, they were not alone. There were several people on stage with them, and you could not see them. And it was another, piece of genius as far as I was concerned, that it actually worked. Alex described it to me, and I was skeptical. I admit, I'm like, really? And he said, yeah, it's gonna work. It's gonna work. And it did. It was fantastic.
Well, it seemed like Michael also learned from his ballet Shinju, when the butterfly people were in black, and how you could through kabuki theater lose things, and it's almost like another form of trompe-l'oeil, fooling the eye, so that you don't see certain things. And with Alex's clever design with those bright lights hitting you. But anytime we had something meticulous that had to be done, Michael could always count on Amy London. And she is still the same way. If we need something done the same way, every single time, consistency or done well, Amy London, I always say, our ballet master extraordinaire. But Michael counted on you to, and you gave Michael some of the tips about some of the magic tricks too. Amy, can you share a little bit about that? That was clever. I had forgotten some of that.
Yeah, so I was the nose, which, I feel like is part of the title character of the ballet. And it was surprisingly stressful, like more stressful than doing fouettes on stage. Managing the dowel and the stick and making sure that's timed right and staying right at the edge of the lighting and holding it still and not letting it tremor around when being nervous, and have it grow musically and shrink musically. And then with the Punch and Judy show, the characters, in rehearsal, Michael was talking about wanting to, have them be able to lean and have the appearance of marionettes. And I had been talking to him about a show that I did in New Mexico. We did a Dickens, A Christmas Carol. And there was a time in there, a very theatrical director who came, he was the choreographer for Juliet Prowse. And so he came from this Vegas showmanship background. And so I was telling him about how I was in a ballet where we all had ski boots attached to skis that would lock into a part of the stage, and we'd step into them and be able to lean forward and back. And so he did a similar idea on that stage. Before those were built, though, in rehearsal, all of us who were the other casts of those 4 dancers would stand in the back and hold their shins. We'd sit on the floor and hold their shins in rehearsal, and then we'd trade spots doing that until we got till that was built, and we were able to have the scenic elements take over those parts.
Amy, were you also operating the woodpeckers? Who was doing the woodpeckers?
I think Dale, it It might have been the Donkey Girls. It might have been Janine and Pamela.
Janine? Okay.
Yeah, I feel like it was the nose. I might have had something to do with when his collar comes off, and I might have
Yes,
been
I think
it was
so.
a donkey ear later, like stage left donkey ear or something. But the things that happened in proximity to the nose, I was just the nose.
Well, it was amazing how those magic tricks worked so well. And the other element that I think that Michael loves to be able to bring, into his ballets was humor. And he always had these slapstick routines, and he would talk about watching those, Red Skelton and all these old comedians on television, and like when he has the foxes on the ground reading Roberto's book that they've stolen from Pinocchio, and he licks one finger and uses, instead of using that finger to turn the page, he's using the other finger to turn the page. He's licking with one hand and turning with the other. Then the book is upside down, so he can't read it anyway. So what is the point? But I don't know how many of you might have noticed, or how many of you remembered, that the boat that Geppetto and Figaroa travel on across the sea to find Pinocchio is called the Blue Fairy. Oh, I laughed when I saw that. It's some things were only things that Michael could see or just the crew knew, but we knew, and it was always silly to see that. If you watch Pinocchio one more time, you can stop the frame and watch it right as Allison and Lee were crossing the stage. Again, that was just such amazing casting. Allison with you as the cat, and just the devoted, always clinging to Lee as Geppetto, and it was just so well done, so well done. And then I loved how you went and grabbed the fish out of the, but it's a catch and release as far as Geppetto's concerned.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Secretly in the post.
yeah. Did you have any points that made you particularly nervous? I mean, some things were so timed when you had to go get the blanket and cover Bert and help with certain things.
Get him dressed. That part I remember, like having to get the buttons just right. And I think they didn't always get all the way straight. We had to go fix them backstage after he came off his next time. But yeah, it was as a quick, getting him dressed there on stage. I remember that being a little stressful, but other than that, I don't think so. It would just be a really fun ballet to be a part of. And this time around, it was really nice because my kids got to watch, and I have a 5 and 9-year-old. And so seeing their enthusiasm with the characters and this ballet, it's just his ballets just go across age. I think that it just speaks on all those levels. So 5 and 9-year-old were so enthused in it. So that was really fun.
Oh, I can imagine they were thrilled to see you there. Oh my gosh, how exciting that you can share that with them. But it's true. I mean, Michael's work is timeless through the ages. The elements always come together, and I think that just also showed, Michael was he was so young at heart. He always had that spirit of youthfulness and excitement, and always willing to try something new. And how can we make this work? How can we make that work? Sandra, even with you and your designs, right? Like how to, I'm going to need a pocket. We've got to hide the flask, or I'm going to need this because we've got to hide that. So it always kept you on your toes too, right?
Yes, but as you say, he was very generous. You want to try something, he usually went for it. So yeah, it was great. I know things evolve, and so you never mind adding that pocket. It just makes it richer.
Yes, it's true. It's true. Well, Joellen, tell us about that process when all of these distinct costumes had to be made. And that was a time Sandra was mentioning that her own shop had closed as far as building all the costumes. And so you had to run around to different shops. Is that how it happened? How did that work out for you,
Did
Joe?
that, yes.
Yeah, there was a lot of running around. But for me, I was learning so much at the time about where do I go to find this and where do I go to find that kind of dye or that kind of paint. And Sandra had been doing this for a while, so she would say, well, just call this person or look up this place. And it was, I love doing these kind of things. It does get stressful when you get towards the end of it and you don't feel like things are to the point of completion that you want them to be, but it's so much fun in the process. I even remember, Sandra, I thought it was one of the first times they were laser printing fabric, because Roberto's little wooden unitard, we put it on Roberto. Sandra was drawing on it to say, this is going to be the kneecap. And Roberto, of course, was ticklish, so he's giggling. And then after she's done drawing it, then you take it apart as a flat piece of fabric again, and then send it to the printer, right?
Right. At that time, they were just developing this kind of digital printing on the variety of cloths. And so, I mean, it's challenging because the unitard is a synthetic and you have to have the right dyes. And it was the same with the pig, because wanting those tattoos, and it's not convenient to try to paint that. So we ended up making quarter scale pattern, and then I just painted it and drew all the tattoos at quarter scale, sent it to the person I was working with at that time was on the East Coast, and they were trying to set up they call it a service bureau, to make this digital printing available for theaters like us. And so he expanded it ×4. And I was nervous. I think Joe was nervous too when that package came back and they unrolled the thing. Would it fit? Would those tattoos be in the right place? But it ended up working. We were just laughing about that earlier.
I also remember Roberto, I think the first time he put on his little blue jacket at the end where he's a little more dressed up, and he turned to Eric and I and said, this is the nicest outfit I've ever worn. I mean, it was so sweet and so touching. And I mean, he was such a nice kid. I'm sure he's a nice adult now, but he was very careful with all of his costumes. You don't imagine a 9 or 10-year-old being that way. You think he's going to take it off and throw it in the corner, but he treasured his costume so much that he was very particular. Take care of them, probably more so than some adults. Allison, I was going to ask you, were your shoes blue? I couldn't remember. I don't remember dyeing your shoes, but maybe I did.
So my shoes, I think we had the white point shoes from the Christmas Ballet. And so I used a pair, but then the unitard went over the shoe. So she made that to come right up to the shoe, and I had sewed my shoes in the unitard. So right at the toe. So it kind of finished that line nicely.
Yeah,
I think beautiful. I had it, I was trying to remember that, but I think I had a pair of shoes that just stayed in there. I didn't retack it each time. They just stayed in there. And as I put on the costume, I put on the shoes. So yeah, but it nicely kind of just finishes that line of the leg.
It does finish the line beautifully.
Yeah.
It was just perfect.
A blue point. Those blue points.
Oh, Siamese.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. I liked the blue intermixed and the white. Was beautiful.
Yeah, it was so clever. And then you even had to get into the makeup to have your cat face. Who painted your face, Allison?
There was something else on the program before it. And I don't remember what the first ballet of the night was, but I do remember it being a fast change, getting on the makeup and the costume and thinking, am I going to get this done in time? And for you too, I think you had all these rhinestones on, the extra sparkle. So we were all kind of rushing to get in, but
exactly.
I was trying to also remember where I someone had given me, maybe it was Sandra, a sketch of a cat face. So I had something to go by a little bit. I did it myself, but I had to practice it a good bit beforehand to kind of, be able to do it in the time, but also, to get some of the nice lines of the nose and just right. And yeah, to make it as cat-like as possible. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure it gave me the picture, but I remember following something to kind of just right.
Now you can do that for your daughter if she wants to be a cat for Halloween.
Sandra,
Well,
was that Richard Battle?
Yeah, he did the actual makeup sketches.
Okay.
I did the.
Oh, he's
the other
such a
one.
master over at the Opera House. Richard Battle is decades of experience. Amazing. Well, and Michael was always so incredible that just like we talked about last week in Cyrano, that he was just, it never worked to say, Michael, I don't have time for this change, or I don't have time. There's not time to get this or that done. And he's like, oh, come on, you can change the world in 60 seconds, except if something goes wrong. So that's the only thing. Yes, it's possible, but there's no room for error. So that did make things very, very stressful, whether you were dancing, making an entrance, or doing the magic, and everything had to be just done with such precision. But it was always such a challenge. I remember Sarah Linney doing such a beautiful job with the lighting, KT, and when she was working on this, again, of course, when you're watching something on the stage, you don't think about the lighting. It just becomes a part of the magic. I mean, sometimes I'm not specifically focusing on that unless I'm going to be restaging something and I need to know exactly where something is. But when you're swept up in the magic of the theater, like when the light would come off of Lee so he could help Roberto take off those elastic straps and just have them in his hand in a tight grip, like holding a tight thing of balloons or something. But then the light was on Allison and doing her solo. So, that could be happening upstage. And it was just masterful. The beautiful lighting that Sarah Linney always created with all of her designs. Do you, KT, have memories of Sarah Linney working on Pinocchio in particular?
Yeah, well, she had actually had Alex Nichols in lighting design class. They knew each other. They had a relationship, from when he was a student at SF State. And so when he had this idea for the proscenium with the lighting around it to fool the eye, she just loved that. She thought it was so clever. And so she worked really hard to get lighting, to get the lighting on you and on Bert and not on Amy and Rachel and Janine, and it just, things like that really created a spark for her, and she loved doing stuff like that.
I guess when there was an added challenge like that with something specific and not just creating the mood of a piece or featuring something or hiding something else, but I just love that. And that's how Michael's ballets became such collaborations. They really were such collaborations because he counted on everyone for their area of expertise, on KT to make sure the production elements ran smoothly and that the shops would be on time and hopefully under budget, but and for Sandra to have all of those costumes ready and just for all of that magic to come together. But he was always open in hearing what might be possible. And he was that way with the dancers too, as Allison was remembering as well, to just really think about being the character. And that was what was so fun about being in a narrative ballet, that you get to play a character and you're thinking, well, what would I do if I was really this person or this animal? And just having those instincts. And it was just so sweet, Allison, the way you just, made it, made it come alive and had that, those sweet, like the sentimental cat. You're sad when Pinocchio leaves and doesn't say goodbye, and then he comes back and gives you a hug or something. And it was just so lovely the way it all came together. We would love to invite you all to, if you have any questions, if there's something specific that we have not addressed yet, feel free to put it in the chat box if you want to leave it with Amy London, and we can bring it up. But it has been so fun revisiting these works, and this truly was, as I said in the beginning, a ballet that was so specific to the cast that we had at the time. And I don't know that we'll find another little boy like Roberto that would be able to do something like this. I remember some of our, in ballet, you have people are just natural turners. Some people have no problem with spinning on an axis. And Roberto was that way naturally. I mean, some dancers work to be able to do a triple pirouette or a quadruple pirouette. And I remember one time he was doing one of his tap dances in the Christmas ballet, and he went into a turn. And of course, he did have the metal plate of the tap shoe, but he went. He did 12 pirouettes in one plie. It was just incredible. So we would always sit there. And if you watch the ballet, when you watch Pinocchio again, you'll see that even the company members were just enthralled watching Roberto, and they're supposed to be the puppets in the back in Stromboli's theater, but they're all just clapping for Roberto as well. The support and respect that we had for Roberto was genuine. We all knew that he was quite a talent. Linda asked what did Roberto do after ballet, and I just wanted to say we've kind of lost touch. We last saw him about 8 years ago when he was still dancing, and showed up in San Francisco. We invited him to be in a couple of performances of the Christmas ballet during our 20th anniversary season. And I know he was doing some art. I think he went back to school for some further education, but we've kind of lost touch right now. So I'm not sure what he's doing right now. We haven't seen him in quite a few years. Another compliment for you, Sandra. The costumes were extraordinary, and we certainly agree with that.
Thank you.
Amy, did you have some questions?
All the questions coming in on my end all are about Bert. Wondering, one is wondering if he's related to Evelyn Cisneros.
No.
Which he's not. Which, although two muses of Michael's for sure with Cisneros. A question from Scott. Roberto appeared to be full of confidence and fearless during his performance, coupled with quite a bit of maturity, a rare qualities. How did performing and working with a youngster like that affect the rest of the cast and crew? From my point of view, it was just, we were in awe. We just saw what a phenom, just what an amazing talent he was, and just really one of a kind with his fearlessness and confidence. And, they talk about triple threats in theater, and he was that in dance. He could, ballet, tap, and theatrics and acting and acrobatics. And the guy was just loaded with talent. I taught at that same school in Castro Valley, and so was able to train him for about 4 years, and he just continued to grow through those years. Also asking about how old he was. Is it true, so was he 9 the first year and 10 the second?
That's right. He was 9 and 10. We did this in 99 and 2000. And yes, he was only 9 years old. Incredible talent. But Allison and I were both remembering how he never seemed to forget his choreography. He was not, whining or difficult in any way. He was always ready to do whatever he needed to do, and was just so excited to be in this production. He just adored Michael, and quite frankly, I do believe that Michael, in seeing Roberto, he had wished, I'm sure, that somebody had given him some of the vehicles that he wanted Roberto to have, or when he saw a talented young dancer, to give them opportunities that he would have enjoyed. He would have enjoyed having those opportunities. And so he didn't see any reason not to feature this child, and we all went along with it. He was a very loving boy, and we became his theater family. He was actually right between the ages of my two children. This is how I can always remember how old Roberto is. And he became good friends with my daughter. And one year, Michael did Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra, and this ballet had a narrator in it. And Roberto was the first cast, and my daughter Catherine was the second cast narrator. And so, but Roberto he was game for anything, and it was kind of like a game, but he knew it was serious. It wasn't like he was going to goof off or anything. But he took everything in. He was like a sponge. He just absorbed everything. And I'm sure, Amy, you found that as a student, as he was as a student. But when Michael had him in rehearsal, he said, "Okay, Bert, and now this is what's happening, and now you're hurting, and oh, you twist your ankle, and you're sad, and he would just act it out. He was just so excited to really play this character, and his beautiful little face was so expressive. He was just such a delight to have around. Really, just incredible. Yeah.
I wanted to add, when we did it the second year, he was doing something, it was in rehearsal, and I remember Shannon Hurlbert saying, at the end of the day, he's like, he was giving me corrections. Little Bert was giving Shannon corrections, and Shannon was like, "What?" And I said, "Well, like what kind of corrections?" And Shannon said that I was doing the step wrong, and he showed me, and the kid was right. He was right, and Shannon was he was so amazed that Bert, not only did he remember all of his choreography, he remembered a lot of other people's choreography too. And he's like, "No, Shannon, that's not it." And he did Shannon's part for him. And Shannon's like, he was right.
It's very true. I remember when we were doing the Blue Angel, and I can't remember what ballet came with that, but Roberto was somehow around the theater at that time too. And he was studying me so much that he was picking up the mannerisms that I had when I was the Marlene Dietrich character in that ballet. And he was a mimic. He was just incredible. The way he could, he just really learned from observation. And I'm sure that Michael was the same way as a child. He was just taking it all in. When Michael would go to watch those Gene Kelly movies and Fred Astaire, and just observing, and taking it all in, and then applying all of that to what he was doing. And Roberto was just the same way. He was just such a student, and he could copy anything. He could mimic, and he was just incredible. And he later ended up doing that in a similar way with his art. He could draw incredibly, and for a while he learned by copying, and then later he started doing his own portraits that were just incredible. So multi-talented for sure.
We have a question, Sandra, about your background there behind you. Are you in your shop, or what kind of implements are hanging on the wall behind you there?
Oh, I'm in my studio, my drawing studio. So these brushes are actually Japanese brushes, and over here some Chinese brushes. These brushes are particularly for dyeing. And so when I had my shop in the space, I used them to dye the silk. They're traditional kimono painting brushes. Now I use them for drawing, and just with paper.
Any other questions, Amy?
I have one other story.
Great, Joellen, please.
Never hand Michael a pair of scissors. I should have learned, I'm trying to think, was Sueños Latinos before Pinocchio or after? I should have learned that lesson. Anyway, the fox and the pig were up on stage, and Michael came up on stage to inspect them. And the fox originally had a long red felt tongue hanging out of his mouth. And Michael turned to probably the woman who had built the head and everything and said, "Can I use those scissors?" Grabbed the tongue, clipped it off, and then threw it on the floor. And the poor woman who had built the hat, I could see her face just staring at the tongue. Everybody walked away and she just stood there and looked at the tongue on the floor. So I learned, do not hand him scissors because he will go at whatever's in front of him if he feels it needs to be changed.
Well, he was famous for that, right? Cutting sleeves off of costumes that he didn't think looked right, or well, he definitely had opinions. Well, the one of the biggest things I learned from Michael was that he was fearless. And I think to be a great artist, you have to be fearless. You have to be able to do what's in your heart and to put out what you believe is the creation as it's intended to come out. It can't be just to please this small facet of this audience or this person. He has to, and it's a very vulnerable position. Anyone who creates anything knows, and any dancer who's out on the stage knows, to put yourself out there, you feel so vulnerable. And you wonder, is the press going to like me? And a choreographer too, is the press going to like this ballet? And obviously we're trying to make this all work economically so that we can keep making art and keep our company employed. But at the end of the day, Michael was just so fearless. And I think that's the sign of a great artist. You just have to have that conviction in what you're doing. And we all learned that from Michael, definitely. Let's see. Oh, well, I'm getting a very nice comment from Andrea. Thank you about keeping Michael's vision alive. And we all do that together. We have new dancers coming into the company, and we're always telling Michael stories. Amy Syward is staging some of her ballets right now, and she also remembers as she was choreographing pieces, she would think in her mind, oh, Michael's telling me about this has got to be on center, but she wants to put it way off to the side. And sometimes she's having an inner dialogue with Michael, but he would also tell her to stick to her convictions. So, we tell these Michael stories, and I think through his choreography, they really have a sense of the man and what he was like. And so I'm always happy that we get to revisit the Christmas Ballet, and it's going to be such a treat to be back in theaters this November and December, finally, after such a hiatus, and to be able to bring that joy and just have that fun once again with all of that beautiful choreography and just sharing that spirit. Michael was just so generous with his abilities and with his art, and fostering so much talent. So if we don't have any more questions, Amy, anything else coming in?
Not questions, a lovely comment from Suzanne. Another thing that she thinks goes with artistic genius is the pure joy you see in what they do and how they do it. Michael's shining face at the curtain calls was always a great example. And so I think that is true. He was a heart on his sleeve kind of guy. And I think we see that through his choreography, but and also in the way he ran his company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you all for joining us. Allison, thank you so much for being here, and Sandra again. And of course, my colleagues, so devoted always to Michael and to the company. Thank you all for being here. We're looking forward to next Monday, when we'll be having a full house with, I think we'll have 8 or 9 of our collaborators from Zorro as we close our fall season. But thank you again for being here, and we just can't wait to see you in the theater. Have a lovely evening. Good night.
Good night.